One of the areas under me is the Operations Center. So part of that responsibility is to oversee global operations and areas where DLA has equities or customers, partners. And so it was, again, December of 2019 when the news first broke about a virus, right, that had broke out in China. And so at that time, the primary interest was just monitoring, right, to see what would happen and see if there were any impact to DLA operations in that area, specifically the Pacific area of responsibility. In March, we started watching as the virus spread through the Pacific area and most notably into the areas of Japan and Korea, which then was more of a operational impact to DLA because of it was now no longer contained within China, but it was now affecting countries where we had U.S. military stationed. And so it quickly went from a monitoring to a action of identifying what was required. And again, back then there was no understanding of what kind of medical equipment and supplies was needed to combat this virus. In addition to still supporting Health and Human Services, DLA was directly supporting the Joint Staff and the Indo-PACOM combatant commander in protecting U.S. forces. So initially that started out with, as we watched the virus spread, it became clear that there was a shortage of necessary medical equipment, PPE, personal protective equipment, and medical equipment. So medical supplies are globally required, and so it quickly became evident that not only were there insufficient U.S. and DoD supplies, but there were countries all over looking for the same material. So we quickly had to help develop a prioritization process on how much protective equipment we would use. And then from there, I think in March when it was declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization, and then when the president announced it in March, DLA also moved forward in supporting not only the Department of Defense, but supporting the nation through Health and Human Services and the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. As the pandemic spread and it became more and more critical, from not only affecting other countries, but now moving into the U.S. and becoming a pandemic, the amount of interest, and obviously high-level interest all the way from the White House down through the Department of Defense, the other federal agencies. I had attended the first couple meetings, and again, just for continuity purposes, it evolved into me being the person that would represent DLA. But I want to stress the fact I just happened to be the pretty face. It was all the team behind me that did all the hard work to make sure DLA was ready to support. As they were tasked, and as we found, no one was really fully prepared for this pandemic. There was an immediate gravitation to, hey, we've worked with DLA before. DLA, are there things you can do to help us with providing medical supplies, transportation capability, acquisition capability? And so that's really how it became an agency effort in support of not only the warfighter and DoD, but for the nation. In April is when the agency stood up the DLA COVID Task Force, made up of professionals from around the agency, both here at the headquarters as well as the major subordinate commands, who were solely responsible 24/7 to provide information and solutions in support of COVID. The task force itself, there were probably at the high point between 15 and 20 people. For the most part, initially, in early April, it was in-person, right? I remember setting aside one of the rooms and setting up computers and having the team segregated in there. But it was also virtual in that we had representatives from, again, the MSCs and our interagency partners. As the pandemic spread and we went to, social distancing, we quickly had to adapt and figure out how to operate 100% virtual where possible. Now, even during that time, there was a subset of people that still, on a daily basis, although socially distant, would still come into the building. In this agency, whether it's operational support in Afghanistan or Iraq, or it's hurricanes or forest fires, when DLA is called to do something, it's amazing the number of people that stand up and volunteer and sacrifice their time and effort to do what's necessary. And that's what I saw here. I had the opportunity to work with a group of professionals that had never worked together as a team, right? Had worked for DLA, but not as a cohesive team. And yet within 2 weeks, you would have thought they were working together for years. The country, right, was prepared for a pandemic based on previous pandemics, but we quickly realized that the magnitude of this virus, which wasn't, located or separated by just one area, but around the globe, that there was a significant shortage and we didn't necessarily have the right items or the right quantities. N95 masks. We saw an increase of about 1,500% in demand. And so what was good or what was beneficial where DLA provided a lot of value is we were able to use some of our war stopper inventory to help cover DoD requirements. Because interesting enough, while DLA has contracts and relationships with many of the major vendors around the country, DoD is only a small percentage of the market. So we're about 4%. So we quickly found out as HHS had requirements for the nation, DLA was only getting about 30% of their orders filled. We were able to offset that through some of our prior planning and war stopper inventory to help minimize. And in fact, there was no impact to the operational forces or DoD operations during the pandemic. At the same time, we were working closely with HHS to make sure that there wasn't competition between DoD and the federal government going to the same contractor. So eventually what happened is, in coordination with FEMA, HHS, and the White House Task Force, we collectively identified the overall national requirement and then leveraged DLA's acquisition expertise. And even today, DLA is currently responsible for not only replenishing DoD inventory levels, but also helping replenish the Strategic National Stockpile for HHS. The global demand far outpaced the supply. So trying to find ventilators and N95 masks when the entire world is going after the same finite supply of material. And very quickly, it wasn't only availability of those supplies, but the raw materials used to manufacture those. That was a challenge, plus, again, the impact of COVID on the people. One thing we did to monitor that early on was the director and our acquisition experts reached out to over 400 companies on a daily basis to assess the impact and identify what we could do to help keep those companies viable, as well as identify any potential shortcomings due to a reduced workforce or reduced supplies. Early on, there was a lack of a common operating picture. There was no one single source or database that had on-hand inventory by location, by organization, by service, nor was there the visibility of any incoming orders or the overall requirement. So this database you mentioned that currently resides in Advana, which now provides and is continually fed real time on providing that common operating picture. So that is one of the, you always try to find success stories and benefits out of a situation such as this pandemic. This is a good news story that it now forced the department to have that reporting and that visibility. And we're going to use that as we go forward and maintain that so that not if, but when the next pandemic comes, 5 years or 20 years, we don't have to spend a lot of time trying to catch up and identify what is available where. So we continue to use that today. We've expanded that concept to the vaccines now, as still, again, using Advana to track how much vaccine was allocated to each DoD location, what is the vaccination rate, and so what is the usage rate and what is the available inventory, which right now is proving to be very critical information, as most of these vaccines have a limited shelf life. So it's allowing us real time to identify where there may be excess vaccine that can't be used before it expires, so that we can we the department can reposition it where it could be used. We were asked again by the National Security Council if there was, if we could provide, we the nations provide support to India and other countries in Southeast Asia as we continue to watch the news and watch the increase in the different strains of COVID. Specifically DLA, about 3 weeks ago, in support of USAID, which is another agency we have an agreement with, we were able to, in a matter of less than a week, provide over 1 million rapid diagnostic tests, which are the the testing kits that are used to test for COVID, and also provided almost 3 million N95 masks, as well as some oxygen generating equipment. Another great story that went from concept to execution in less than a week. Working directly in support of Health and Human Services. But those test kits went to more than just schools. While they went to schools, they also went to nursing homes, healthcare facilities, and we continue to provide those, as well as most recently masks, to those organizations as a means to help prevent or minimize the spread of COVID. Middle to late fall, when Pfizer was the first vaccine approved, and soon after that was Moderna. And because of DLA's experience, as most people are aware, we're responsible for distributing the annual flu vaccine to the Department of Defense. As a result of that, DLA was asked to support the vaccine distribution mission to all OCONUS overseas locations and Navy fleet. So it was interesting. There was, I think now we're up to 57 locations, but in close coordination, which was then Operation Warp Speed, and now, we were responsible for distributing this vaccine to all the overseas locations. The Biden administration mandate on masks was not a surprise. again, through our coordinated efforts and having General Sanford and others embedded with the administration's task force, we were aware of the pending requirement. So we knew that there was a requirement where the details that we had to work through was the locations. But not a surprise, even for the quantity that was required as far as sourcing those masks, and then working closely with HHS and the White House to distribute to the directed locations. That was different than what we had done in the past, because in the past we had procured or acquired the material and then turned it over to HHS, who would distribute. They realized through that process that it was better off if they would just, we would source it and distribute it. So what we did for the masks is we brought them into our inventory, and then we're able to operate at the time schedule of the administration to deliver it to those locations. Very similar to the test kits, nursing homes, healthcare centers, and any other location that they needed. The ingenuity that DLA has in using kind of the additive manufacturing, we were able to manufacture and provide over 11,000 face shields to the Javits Center during the height of the pandemic in New York City. Our ability to, provide and deliver 150 million test kits in less than a week. Most recently, the ability to, within 10 days, move over 2.5 million N95 masks and 1 million test kits to the country of India to help support them. And then even as we sit here watching as vaccines are going to go from the United States to Korea. So it's those things. It's nothing I did. It's what this agency did, and the fact that no matter what is thrown on our plate, I mentioned a hurricane, a forest fire, a drawdown in Afghanistan after how many years, and yet it's not an either or, but we do it all, and it's because of the people that do it. So that's what'll stick in my mind. Sleepless nights? No. And that's an interesting question, because I mentioned the 24/7. But the reason for that is because of the team and the DLA employees. There wasn't a night that I would go home or worry that something wasn't going to happen, because I knew that the right people, this agency, had what it took to mission complete. So no, I probably have more sleepless nights worrying about the Buffalo Bills and how they're going to do in football. When this started, General Williams, right, was the director. And as you mentioned, right, from early onset, he made it clear, and he didn't have to, because the agency already knows this, that when DLA is called, or even if we're not called, we will do whatever we can in support of this country and the department. And so one thing early on, he made that very clear and gave very clear guidance that, don't leave any stone unturned. And while it may not be something we do every day, if it's something we could do, let's make sure that we do all we can to help other agencies, to help the department, to help the country. And then Admiral Skubik, when she came in June, it was a seamless transition. Very similarly, we were in the middle of it, but both her and the General Williams were amazingly supported. And the thing that I like the best about both of them is they allowed us and allowed me the freedom to operate and make decisions on behalf of the agency and represent the agency, and allowed the team the latitude they needed and flexibility to achieve their objective, which was do all we can, and it's a no-fail mission. I think if you go back to the original, right, guidance or direction of the director that we will do all we can, I think the agency can look back and the people involved can look back and say, mission accomplished. I mentioned using additive manufacturing. I talked about new ways of, finding new sources of supply, leveraging new acquisition strategies, identifying how do you get -20 vaccine into a country that there is not a easy way to do that. I think that's probably, anyone involved with this, whether they watched or they were on the front row seat, I think should feel a sense of pride that once again, DLA was called and DLA delivered. I think there's a lot of lessons learned, and I think there's a lot of relationships that have been built, which I'm confident that when the next problem comes, DLA will be asked early on. And all that I would ask is whoever is supporting it, that you do all you can and leverage all DLA capabilities and leverage the people, and you'll be successful.